let's kick it off. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Beyond the Hire podcast, where we dive into recruiting for the go-to-market space, what it takes to build winning teams, and how industry leaders got to where they are today. My name is Sandra, and I'm the VP of Marketing here at Bets Recruiting. And today, I'm accompanied by Ayse, the marketing manager at Bets, and our very special guest, Aron Vuijsje. He was the very first salesperson at Monday.com, formerly The Pulse, where he spent 7 years. Then he went on to become the VP of Sales at Doof and is now the VP of Sales at Rep.ai. Welcome, Aron.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Also, to let everyone know, Aron and I are both Dutch. So if you hear a little accent, then that's why. We were both born and raised in the Netherlands, although that is no longer where we are today.
You might see it in my name as well.
Yeah, I know. Why are you pronouncing it so funkily? Aron is the Dutch pronunciation, but for everyone else, I'm sure Aron is perfectly fine. Saying that to Ayse, if she wants to refer to you as Aron, that's fine.
You can also do Vuijsje if it's easier.
Yeah, so easy. Say it again. I'll just lip sync it.
Honestly, Ayse, is that any easier?
No, my name looks like, I don't even know what it looks like, but no one ever gets it right on the first try. I'll just say that.
It's a nice icebreaker, from the sales perspective. Sometimes it's a good thing.
Oh yeah, when you just go,
Very
how
true.
do I pronounce your name?
Yeah, exactly. If it's somebody difficult, you can exchange from, hey, if you say my last name, I say yours, makes it immediately less painful.
To be honest, Ayse's name is so difficult that even after, 2.5 years at our company, half our colleagues still mispronounce her name. So
yeah, and half of them are scared to, even though they know how to pronounce it, they'll be scared to say it in front of a live audience.
Oh, 100%. Even on the leadership team, someone 100% knows how to pronounce it. But I feel like whenever there's a moment of pressure, they mispronounce it.
Yeah, because they just get scared. I'm like, it's okay. You know it. I believe in you.
I believe in you. I'm very familiar. My first name usually goes well. Maybe the sound is a little bit different when it's a Dutch person or American. But the last name is quite consistently problematic.
Yeah.
I do love it though. And also the spelling, there's an I and a J in there, which again, very confusing. But anyway, we shouldn't be talking about your name for too long because there's
It's
so
a beautiful
much.
name. It's a beautiful name. But yeah, let's get to the work.
From that. Let's move on from that. So there's a lot we want to learn from you. And obviously we want to learn about, industry leaders and how they got to where they are today. You've had a very interesting career. So I want to start at the very, very, very beginning. Back in, my God, was it 2016, 2017 when you first joined Monday?
Yeah, 2016 February.
Oh my goodness. Okay, that's a long time ago. So talk a little bit about the process, how you found out about Monday / The Pulse at the time, and how you got hired there and what your role was.
Well, of course, a recruitment agency, right? I recommend everybody to work with recruitment agencies, of course.
Thank you.
Shameless
So that's
plug.
really how it started. Yeah, exactly. So that's really how it started. I got 3 different interviews at 3 different companies. One of those was, as you mentioned, The Pulse, Monday.com today. Interviewed at all 3 companies, ended up deciding on The Pulse at the time, Monday.com now. Very happy that I did so. That ended up in a really beautiful journey. I stayed in the company for 7 years. It was a kind of unique experience in the way that I had the possibility to really be in pretty much every single sales position that the company started with and then ended with after the 7 years. And also the unique position of being able to build it twice in 2 different countries. So that was really a fun experience where I learned a lot.
What was your first job title when you got hired?
I actually started as customer success. So it's quite a funny story. Before that, I did some sales roles. I thought hey, maybe I want to try something different. Ended up taking a customer success role. I said, I'm really looking for a company that I love. I'm really looking for a product that I love. I'm really looking for a culture that I love. And then about 3-4 months in that I was at The Pulse, I realized I found everything that I wanted, but I want to do sales. So that's kind of how it started. Actually, when I joined the company, there was no sales team. They got to pretty much 10,000 customers without having sales. So it was, you had a customer success team. And if somebody asked, where can I put my credit card? Then we would guide them to how to do that. But of course, that's not really sales. So that's where it started. And the moment that I realized that I was really missing the sales aspect, I started some conversations with my manager at the time, Idan Hershko. And he was amazing in kind of giving me the insights of why didn't the founders want a sales team, which gave me a great possibility to prepare a pitch and show to them that my goals as starting a sales team were very similar to their goals as what they want for the company. And that went really well. At that point, they told me, you know what, take 3 months. In those 3 months, do 50% of your time customer success, do 50% of your time sales, and let's see how it goes. In those 3 months, I ended up closing the biggest customer of the company. So that went quite well. And from there, it started rolling really quickly. The CTO, and initially didn't want to have a sales team, ended up becoming my manager. And really like changed 180%, fully supported it, got my back throughout the whole process. And that's really where the sales journey started, from the first salesperson to ending up managing a team within Israel, to then moving to the US, opening up a team in the US. Then I started managing the manager, so got into the director role, and ended 7 years later when I said, it's time for the next challenge. But definitely a part of my life that I'm looking back to with a lot of pleasure and joy.
So tell me, how did they get the first few clients if they didn't have a sales team, and why were they so against having a sales team?
So I think like the company really was built on very strong foundations of product, customer success, and marketing. So they had a really, really strong marketing team, which meant that we had an amazing flow of inbound leads. We had a very strong customer success team, which means that the customers that we got, we were able to retain them. And we had a strong product. So that's really the base of the foundation. That also prepared me for having a huge luxury, right? Because it's, of course, if you already have such a base, it's some amazing area to work from. So pretty much what I was doing is I proved the model that we can get companies on board versus teams. And that's really what made a really big difference. What I did in those early days, I know there's 2 very small accounts. So it's like 2 5-user basic accounts, which is pretty much the smallest accounts that we could have at the time. But what I realized is that it's 2 very small accounts that were separated in a very big company with a director inside of the account. So I saw that there was a lot of potential. So the moment that I saw that, that's where I started reaching out, focusing on how can I help you? How can I set it better up? Monday is, by the way, a platform that helps you to build any type of workflows. So that's also a very easy way kind of to get a consultative way in from, hey, let me help you. I can build out different types of flows for you. Let me see how I can help. And throughout those conversations, it became clear that he was working on a product that was cross company-wide, which touched 3,000 people. So the moment that I realized that, it was, okay, great, there's a lot to work with here. And then after a lot of work together, we actually ended up getting that whole group on the account. And that's how it ended up being the biggest account at the time.
That's such a good strategic move, to go from just individual teams within an organization to just onboarding entire organizations.
Absolutely. And also, like I said, the product is really perfectly set up for that, just because it's so flexible. So you really have the ability to build something new for every company. So it made a great way of getting introductions to other team members, creating value very quickly, and also strategically thinking about what are processes in the company that touch the most people, or what are processes in the company that if you get in there, then you're pretty much good to go for the whole company, right? So for example, if you get into security or legal, that's a very good starting point to kind of grow to the rest of the company. So sometimes, even if it's a small team, it's just a strategic decision to focus on that team because it opens up a lot of doors. But on the other side, think about enablement, think about project management, think about those type of flows that really touch almost every single department. Those are obviously great areas for me to focus on back then.
So how many people were at the company, and what series stage was the company at when you first joined?
So when I started, it was about 25 people. It was just after the A round. And then from there on, we went to the B round, the C round, the D round, and then the post-IPO round. So that was the point that I started there.
That's amazing. And did anything change whenever you guys got a new series, like in hiring? Was it always like the moment that you guys started making more hires?
I wouldn't say that it's specifically because of the funding rounds. I would say it's just more because of the development of the company. So if you're, as I mentioned in the beginning, they didn't have a sales team at all, and they also didn't want a sales team. And just to get back to that, because you also asked me about that, it really came from a good place. Like, their ideology was, what's going to happen? Very big companies are going to define how the product is going to look like. It's going to ruin it for all of the other customers. And they also connected it to kind of that unethical type of sales, that Wolf of Wall Street type of idea. And that's really the change that I made there, because I introduced them to value-based selling, consultative selling. And that was a really great way to connect our goals. Because in the end, what do? I want the customers to be happy, and I want the customers to grow, and I want to bring in as many new customers as I possibly can. Those goals are, of course, completely connected with the goals of the founders. So that's really where it started. And also, in full credit to them, even though they initially really didn't want a sales team, how quickly they gave me the capability and the possibility to prove them wrong is not something that a lot of leaders are willing to do, right? Usually, if somebody already made up their mind, they don't give you that chance. And in this case, I think it speaks a lot that they said, you know what, prove us wrong. And the moment that I did, they immediately embraced it and ended up being, huge supporters. So that was a really big part of it.
I actually love the movie Wolf of Wall Street. Complete side note. One of my friends was in it. You've met him, Alan. Michael Jefferson is in the movie, and do you remember like that?
Exactly. No, it's a good movie. Don't get me wrong.
I love that. How did you guys then make sure when you did have that sales team and you got to build out the team? And I want to hear more about that. How you kind of made those first few hires. But when you did have that sales team, how did you make sure there was no Wolf of Wall Street type culture? And can you talk a little bit about the compensation structure that you guys implemented? Because it's slightly different from other companies that I know.
It's depends on when you're looking at it, right? So like if you're looking today, it's going to be much more similar, but with a focus on still not only looking at individual contributors, but really connecting it to a lot of things that promote teamwork, collaboration, and helping each other. Of course, also a big part of that is your individual goals. If you go back all the way to the beginning, I would say, first of all, like somebody that's really kind of that Wolf of Wall Street is not going to join the company at that point, right? Because it was different types of salaries. There was no commission. So that's kind of what Sandra is referring to. All the way in the beginning, it was a very weird model. And why do I say a very weird model? Because sales pretty much everywhere is a commission-based role. And like I mentioned, what I had to do when I was in that company, we kind of had to open up the mindset of the company to sales. And part of that was initially from like, why would there be commission for sales? We have developers that work really hard. We have product managers that work really hard. We have customer success managers that work really hard. They don't get commission. So why should sales get commission? Marketing that works really hard, right? So like everybody in the company works really hard. Why should it be different between sales or any other department? And again, my goal at that point was opening up a sales team. And also I actually liked the idea that they were thinking. Now, over time, like being in the company for a long time, the truth is it's not realistic at the place that the company is now. And it's not realistic when you really need to hire like enterprise type of salespeople, just because there's simply so much competition. But when we started, we hired for potential, not for experience. So first of all, most people that we hired didn't come from a sales background or came from a very limited sales background. And it was people that were really excited about the product, about the opportunity to start working in tech, which actually led to like most of the early hires ended up being managers and directors and leadership within the company. And that's also part of the reason why I'm so focused on it's so easy to only look at experience. And what you're seeing in companies and also what we saw at some point in Monday is because you have this luxury that you get thousands of resumes, you start adding more and more and more criteria that are not necessarily relevant for the role. And that can filter out a lot of people that actually have really high potential. Now, of course, that's not a step that you can take when you're looking for an enterprise type of salesperson. But when you're starting a sales team, that is actually super valuable. When you already have people in your team that have a lot of experience, it's actually really healthy to bring in people with potential that can grow within the organization. And those are also, at least in my experience, usually the people that stick with you, right? Because they saw so much growth in the position that they started. They really appreciate if you do it right and you develop them and you help them to grow in their professional career, not just for the job that they're at, but also for the future. Those are people that are not leaving because somebody pays you a little bit more. And that's really what we saw over there. So like in the beginning, we didn't have big budget. There was definitely no way for us to like hire people with lots of experience. So what did we do? We looked at people that we believed that had a lot of potential. We looked at people that we believed that were very hardworking. I also did, of course, sales demos and everything to understand from, hey, does this person has the capability to pick up very quickly on the sales skills that are necessary? And kind of as a little side note, that's also part of the reason why I actually asked people to give us a demo on our product. Because on one side, you can say like, that's kind of, nasty. That's a platform that nobody knows. Like, why don't you just let them do a presentation on their own product? Because what I'm looking for is how quick can you learn? I don't care if you learned your previous product by heart and you know everything. I want to know how quick can you pick up things? How, quick can you move around? So for that reason, I'm not expecting that person to be a sales engineer and know the product inside out, but it will tell me a lot about how interested are they, how quick do they pick up, how do they communicate with someone, do they understand how qualification, demoing, closing works. So that's also a way of how it helped us to actually understand, is this a relevant person, even if they didn't have that experience yet and they couldn't go from the resume and look at their previous targets and things like that.
Has anyone ever dipped because they were like, this is too much work for an interview?
Well, definitely, and a lot more towards the end. Obviously, in the beginning, like the bigger the company became, the more possibilities you have of hiring people. It also tends sometimes to make the process longer. And those are also things that I think is really important to be very aware of, because I will say, like, a long process is very unhealthy in an interview process, especially if you're hiring for people with a lot of experience. If you wait a couple of days, like, the top people are probably already gone, right? Or at very minimum already in conversations with other people. So I think being very much on top of that and really trying to keep it as minimum as possible, combine certain sessions if it helps, is really important. But yeah, for sure, there were people that were like, I'm not going to go through all of this. And to be fair, that's also part of the reason why you do it, right? Because those are then not the people that we believe are motivated enough to actually be there.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really good point. And I bet that's something we recommend against, of having too many interview rounds, because it's also just unnecessary. And actually a fun story, I think fun, maybe not as interesting to everyone else. The way I got hired at Bets is they first had me interview for a different role at a different company. I was interviewing with a few different companies at the time, and one of the companies was through Bets. And while I was in that interview process, they said to me, actually, hey, we like you. We are hiring for a role like you. So would you mind interviewing with us as well? And I was like, okay, that's odd. That feels like a conflict of interest, but sure. Because I was having such a good experience with them. And my recruiter, Michelle, still with us today. She's amazing. She was so nice. I was like, if they're all like you, of course I want to interview at Bets. And they knew exactly how many rounds the other companies had that I was interviewing with that were going really well. So they sped everything up for me so much that I felt so wanted, that they suddenly became my top pick for roles when I got a few offers in. So that's a really good example, I think, of, where you're interviewing with different companies that all seem really amazing, but the one that really does speed up the interview rounds, because they know if they're not fast enough, they're going to lose you. That's the one that ends up winning the candidate that they all want.
It's so, the process is so important. And I can say in different companies that I've been about, especially in the early stage, right, when it's not so organized yet and you don't have a full HR team and everything like that, how quickly you can lose people through the process. Also, how many people actually said from, like, I continued the process because of the conversations that we had and how things goes, or because you actually gave me constructive feedback right after the demo on the spot, where every other company kind of keeps a black face. And then at some point you get an email, positive or negative. You have no clue what you did right or what you did wrong. So if you go kind of those little ways, it makes a huge difference. And like we kind of spoke about before, the more experienced people are, the more that they're wanted in the industry and you're competing against a lot of other people, the more that you need to sell the company, you need to sell yourself, right? Like, they have so many different options. So kind of what you connect to, what I used to do when I was interviewing people, I actually first walked them through the whole office. Why did I do that? Because we were very data oriented. So there were dashboards everywhere throughout the office from everything that we did. So that alone already made a huge impression, right? Because it's not that common that companies are so open and transparent about their data.
Aron showed me the New York office and it was beautiful. And there was TV screens everywhere with results on there and like people on fire. And it was so thrilling.
So that kind of already sets it up on a really good starting point, because one of the biggest things, especially for people with experience, is having availability of data. So that already started up a point that's like, okay, this is really interesting. This is a company that knows what they're doing. They're focusing on data. They're following the data. Also, by doing that walk throughout it, starting with like a coffee or whatever it is that they wanted, you start the interview kind of in a much more relaxed space. One of the other things that I like to do is the first question that I ask is if they have any burning questions on their chest that they want to get out before we start with the interview. Again, because I don't want them the whole time to have in their head, I have this question that I need to ask. Like, I really want them to have a, good flowing conversation, feel comfortable and see like the true potential behind the person.
That's amazing. So I want to take a few steps back because this is a question I always really like is so when you were building out your sales team, right? You make your first hire, right? The first hire on the sales team. And that was probably also your first time as a sales leader suddenly having to make those hires. What were you looking for then besides obviously you said potential? Like what kind of personality, just to give tips to other people who are trying to get hired at startups?
Yeah.
What was it that made you make that first hire?
Ooh, that's a good question. That's a really good question. Let me think back about that for a second because that's been some time.
It's been a very long time.
I think actually the first hire came through a recommendation also from some of the investors in the company. That's where the first one was. The second one was somebody that was already that I knew actually. That was a good friend of mine that I brought in. And then from there on, all the other ones were completely disconnected. So the first one was obviously went through all the processes, went through the rounds. Also, that person already had some sales experience. That was the first hire. Then the second one was somebody that came from a completely different industry, but that I knew that had strong capabilities in sales. So that was the second person that I brought in. And then the third person was like just came out of a law degree. The fourth person started his own company and then looked for something different. So there were definitely a lot of differences. When I hired the first person in the US, it was completely different because then it was already a much larger company.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that. So, we touched upon this briefly, but Alan moved to New York to start the Monday.com office there with a small group, right? But you obviously heading up the sales team. So you were already an established name. Everyone knew Monday. I remember I used to see Monday.com all over every single subway station. It was absolutely amazing. Such good marketing. Always love their marketing. I talk about it all the time. Aisha knows this. Big fan girl. Also, amazing budgets that we can all only dream of. Great marketing budgets. One day. One day. But talk about that. So how did you set all of that up? Was culture most important because you were building out a new office?
Yes.
Was experience most important?
No, definitely. I would say culture was really crucial. That's also the reason why they wanted me to open up that office. So like one of the things, especially in the early days, right, when the office was already up and running, then you built the culture within the organization and then it doesn't really matter anymore. But at the beginning, when we started building it from the foundation, we really wanted to have a similar type of culture as what we had in the original office. So that was also the reason that we sent two people initially, me and Tom Ronen. Tom Ronen was doing it on the customer success side. I was doing it on the sales side. But even following that, we had on the regular people flying over, staying there for a month, even 2 months in the beginning, really to help to get everybody up and running very quickly in the office, but also to create that same atmosphere that we had in the organization that I would describe that was really kind of an atmosphere where everybody felt an owner. And a big part of that is also because everybody had options, of course. So to some extent, that is also true. And that just creates a whole different level of motivation. And that's what we saw in the office. Like people were working really hard, really reliable, very proactive, like being willing to pick up on things that are not directly connected to your role. And as I mentioned before, this is something super important for the founders. This is something super important for me. So that was really a type of culture that we also wanted to build over there.
That's amazing. Okay, so you mentioned options. So I want to talk a little bit more about compensation because obviously we started out saying you guys did not have a bonus structure on the sales side when you first started because that wasn't the culture that the team was used to. But now you mentioned options. So obviously it's a huge part of making people feel very involved, and you guys did make it to IPO. A lot of companies, startups you work for don't. And you just have options that kind of feel like fake money. With Monday, it was very real, and it is very real, obviously, Alan being the first salesperson and then worked there through IPO. I'm sure we can all imagine how great that must have felt for him.
It was a good experience.
It's like, woo! I know. For those of you who don't know, Alan and I are related. He's my cousin. That's why I know him so well, and we maybe somewhat look alike. I don't know. But yeah, I was like,
you do.
When they make IPO, I'm like, I'm your favorite cousin. Let's go celebrate. But anyway, let's talk about compensation and options and how much of the compensation package was options and how real did it feel to people and how much did you talk about the goal of IPO?
It was definitely part of the conversation. I think all the way in the beginning, it wasn't such a big part of it. Obviously, the closer that you get there, the more that you're at that place, the bigger it becomes. To be honest, it didn't play such a big role in the beginning. Like it plays a big role after people already joined because you realize it. But because it's the majority of the people that joined there, they weren't really experienced with like options or things like that, right? So it was kind of
Okay.
getting introduced to it for the first time. Again, when you're moving to an area where it's people that are a lot more experienced, that's going to be the first question that they ask you. So it also really depends where. But I think the part that it did really do is, like I said before, right? People really feel like I am part of this company. Like if the company does really well, I do really well. And I think that's like a really, really great thing of having options or giving some equity in a company is that it really aligns the goals, right? Like if the company does well, I do well. If the company doesn't do well, I don't do well. It's pretty straightforward.
That makes sense. And were there any conversations when people were hired about the goal of IPO, or was that something you guys kept private?
I wouldn't say that IPO specifically was a goal. The goal was to build a great company. I would say an IPO was a mean to that goal, but it wasn't from, oh, we need to IPO. The founders were like the Monday.com is their baby. Like they're still the founders. They're like still there. They're running the show. It's not something that they were in this for like, yeah, let's, get that IPO, take the money and run. Really the opposite. So like for them, it wasn't a goal. It is a mean to become a bigger company, to get more people involved, to become to the company that they are today. But it wasn't like they were talking from, oh, our goal is to get to an IPO.
Okay. Okay. So even when you were given your options in the beginning, you were like, oh, that's nice, but it wasn't necessarily something you were fighting to get more of.
I mean, obviously, you understand if something goes really well, that's the direction that you're going to. So that helps. And yeah, if they would say we don't want to go there, right? We don't want to do an IPO or an acquisition or anything,
Yeah.
then yeah, that would be a concerning sign if you're talking about options. But I mean, more like in the end, those things also go really well together, right? Because to get to a good IPO, you need to be a good company. So in the end, they align. But I would say even myself, it wasn't in the early days that was something that I like was super focused on. Or I would even say that I really realized like the full potential behind it. That's really something that happened more later on. At that time, for me, it was really simple. I want to find a good job that allows me to stay here and live here because it's quite expensive to live there, very similar to New York. So for me, it was really like, okay, I want to find a place that I see as a career, not as a job that I'm doing for a small amount of time. I really wanted to build my career somewhere. So for me, the biggest things were like, it wasn't money, but it needs to be good enough to be able to live. But much bigger for me is the company that I believe in. Is it people that I believe in? Is it a product that I will buy myself?
Wonderful. And because you were the first salesperson, obviously you grew into a leadership role, but eventually you were tasked with hiring your own manager, right? Which I think
Twice.
is twice, which I think is so interesting. I've never had to hire my own boss, and I'm sure that comes with a lot of feelings. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah. For sure, it comes with a lot of feelings, obviously. But I will say, I always very much have been focused on I just want to get better. I just want to learn more. I want to see that I'm growing in my career. That was by far the biggest thing for me. And taking into consideration that I also jumped into a lot of new positions that I never did before. And especially like this was not something that happened immediately, right? When we already started growing, only at that point when they said from, okay, now it's time for a VP because we're, talking about crazy amounts. I also understood if I'm going to have somebody good above me, it's going to also propel my career. So for me, it was kind of as long as the person that's coming in can help me grow and can help the company grow, I'm still going to get to my end goal much quicker than if I don't have somebody that I can learn from. So in the first manager, that area wasn't really sales because in the sales, I was really comfortable. The area that I wasn't as comfortable with yet is focusing on the data, bigger picture thinking, right? Going through all of the reports. And he was amazing at that. He actually didn't came from a sales background. So he also wasn't an expert at all in sales, but he managed very, very big teams. He actually ended
What
up
is what
being,
is their title? What was their title when they were hired?
when they
Do you
were hired, the
remember?
VP, but he actually ended up becoming the CRO. So he ended up leading all of the client facing teams, marketing, customer success, and sales. So that was a good hire. Again, also over here, he came in also as a recommendation. And one of the things that I think the company did really, really well is understanding that this is not an easy process when somebody is like busting his ass off, work that hard to get to the point where he is, and then all of a sudden, bop, somebody gets put above you. I think it's a very, very common scenario. A lot of people go through that, and it's always kind of a difficult process. But by really making me a very big part of it, by giving me the chance of having a veto before they hire anyone, that changed everything. So, of course, everybody that was in leadership was involved in the process because it's a very key role. But from the get-go, they were, you have the end yes or no. You're involved throughout the whole process. And if you don't see that as somebody that, you can work well with, then we will not move forward. So that really helped throughout the process. Then on top of that, like I said, pretty quickly after meeting him, I saw immediately like, this is somebody that has skills that I can learn from that I'm missing today. So it wasn't, I need somebody that can help me or teach me how to sell. Like I got that covered. I'm good at this, but I do need somebody that can give me that better understanding of how does it work when you manage a larger team? How do I focus on all of this data? Because when you have bigger teams, it's not anymore that you can do a qualitative deep dive in every person. So I really learned a lot from him on that big picture thinking, diving deeper, focusing on data. That was where I really, really learned from him. And then after I moved to New York, that was the second time. So again, there I opened up the whole team, grew the team, company went amazing, everything went well. And then there it happened again, right? There we need to hire somebody above you. And again, right, the first emotion I think that everybody has is like, what the fuck? Like I built this from the ground up. I hired every person. Like, what are you talking about? But also realistically, again, at that point, right, the company was a rocket ship in the end, right? So we're not talking about small numbers. We're talking about huge, huge numbers. And if I was honest with myself, it was also fair to say, like, this is a part of the company where it makes sense to bring somebody in that has that experience, that went through this before, that saw IPOs, that went through that whole process. So I was still very aware of that. And again, it went kind of through the same process. I was fully involved in the whole hiring process. I very quickly really liked the guy that we ended up hiring. Jameson is his name. And also kind of connected to what you say of you don't want to make processes too long. One of the things that I think that was really good that we did with him, we actually invited him to come to the office for a full day to sit together, to like have conversations about how he thinks and where does he think the company should go. And I was sitting there, the CEO, the CTO, and him. And that kind of like it's long to be a whole day together, but it cuts a huge amount of the overall process and it gives a very high level of confidence. Is this the right person? Now you can't do that with everyone, but when you're hiring for such a key position in your company, I think it's a very smart idea to like at least spend 3 hours as a working session together, because in the end, it's always different with interviewing. And, again, it's not realistic to do that with every, SDR that you're hiring. But if you're hiring for such a strategic position, I think it's a very smart move to do a work session together, see how he works, see how he responds. That went really well. After that, he ended up taking me to a bar around the corner. And I was like, okay, I like you. This is cool. You're a very social guy. You know what you do. You have a great background. That's kind of where it started. And then throughout that process, like I truly saw from this somebody again that I can learn from. He was also different from what before. Like initially, my first manager was actually the CTO. So again, somebody with no background. Then the second manager before that managed huge R&D team. So again, not really somebody with the like sales leadership background. And then he was really my first manager that really came from traditional sales background, typical salesperson, very extrovert, huge network. So that was really what I could take away from working with him. So looking back, number one, it was the best thing that could happen to me. It helped me to grow so much quicker. And thank God also at the time, I was smart enough to think about it from that perspective, right? I could give you also very different, but also another example. I had many people that I managed that were making more money than me. And on the one side, the first response can be like, whoa, like that's insane. Like, how can that be okay? But on the other side, you can also look at it from the opportunities that I got here and the people that I'm hiring actually been in sales way longer than I've been, right? So there is a logic behind it. And again, of course, throughout the period that I was in the company, that very much changed. But if you're looking at it from the very early days, it actually made sense. So even though it kind of feels shitty, and I'm like, I'm the person onboarding them, I'm the person training them, I'm the person managing them, and they still make more money than me. It was way more valuable that they gave me the opportunity to get into these positions, to get to a place where I will make more and where I will be in that amazing position and where I, got that chance. So for me, you can go to tons of companies. Well, not tons of companies, not that easy. But, you can go find companies that pay you a lot more. But there's very little companies where you actually get the capability to get such a career journey like I did. And yes, of course, I worked really hard and I jumped on every opportunity that I had and I took risk and all of that. But even with all those things, like you still need to be in a right place where people allow you and give you the confidence to grow into roles that, at the time, my resume didn't really, was in a position where it's like, yeah, you start our sales team and grow and get to the place that I ended up going. That was really based on, he's a hardworking guy. We want to give him that chance. And then I did the things right to really take advantage of the opportunity that I got and work hard and grind and literally do everything that I can to get it paid off. But still, you need to get that chance. So I think that's very unique that they gave me the trust to prove myself. And then every time that I proved myself, that also allowed me to get to that next step, ending up staying there for 7 years.
It's amazing. Actually, it reminds me of when I worked at a company called Signal AI. We used to have an Ask Me Anything with the leadership team, and you got to submit anonymous questions. And someone had submitted, I know it's one of the younger guys, like to the CEO, like, do you make less or more than like a certain amount of money? And the CEO was like, I make less. And he also said, fun fact, I'm not the one who makes the most money at this company. And I remember all of us were like shocked. But it makes sense now a few years later, because if you're an incredible salesperson, the amount of money you can make is absolutely incredible. Even at our company, some of our recruiters are so good that they make
that's the benefit
money.
of the commission model, right? So like in that perspective, if you're working in enterprise sales, it's actually very common that it's not base wise, but commission wise for sure, right? So if you're looking at that, like it's usually the top performers will make most money. And that's also, you have a lot of leadership that decide from, hey, I'm going to take a step back because I can actually make more money this way. So that is definitely true. If you're the best salesperson in the company, then you have the ability to make a good amount of money. Also, of course, especially if they have no ceiling in regards to commission.
Yeah, and we only have a few minutes left, but there's a last few things I want to touch upon. And I mentioned this briefly to you a few weeks ago, but I think a lot of companies or a lot of people say, and we hear this a lot, obviously, in recruitment, that a lot of people don't leave bad jobs, but they leave bad managers, right? Which I think is very important of building out a team. And obviously, you were really good for company culture, which is why they asked you to open the US office in New York City. And I mentioned this to you. You when you worked at Monday.com, I got to in New York, I got to spend a lot more time with you and see you be a leader. And something I didn't tell you at the time was that I loved the way you walked the fine line of being a serious manager with a lot of authority, but also were able to be your team's friend. Like I remember you had a birthday party and you invited a bunch of people from your team in New York. And I was so surprised because I think I had only had managers before that who really kept that very separate, right? They were just kind of my boss and maybe I didn't even like them very much. I don't know if they loved me, but definitely I wasn't invited to their parties or their home. And the way they all showed up and were so in awe of you, and not that that needs to be the case, but they had so much respect for you and they liked you as their friend, but they still respected you and knew you were the boss. And knew that, you know, what you said was real, but they also were able to spend kind of time together socially. I thought was so incredible to see and really inspired me to be a different manager in my future roles and have a different type of relationship with my team, because it made me realize I can also be friendly with my team and maybe be friends while also still being their manager and make sure that still we hit our targets and goals. So I wanted to let you know, obviously, that was so inspirational. Is there anyone that you learned that from or that you had that relationship with that helped you get to that position?
Well, first of all, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And just to kind of jump on the anecdote with my own anecdote, it's also very different from the way that people work in the US. So I will say at the very beginning that I started, that kind of response that you had, and I only found that out as well, like a couple of years later.
I know.
But a very similar situation where for me, it was like very normal, right? It was weekend, we finished the work week. I was like, hey guys, you want to grab a beer? And like 2 years later, the guy's like, why the fuck did my director ask me to grab a beer? This is so weird. This is not how things work. And that same guy, obviously, after being in the company for a while, like he was the biggest fan of it and everybody had a great time together. For me, I definitely took a lot away from previous managers, both in Monday and of course also other companies, for the good and the bad. And for me, that really helped me to, okay, what don't I want to be as a manager and how do I want to be as a manager? And I really looked at both of those perspectives, from what were things that I really didn't like with managers that I had and what were things that I really liked with managers that I had. And in the end, it's to be honest, pretty simple. It's like the biggest thing is to believe in your team and showing that you back your team and that you're there for your team. And that kind of goes like lead by example. And probably one of the best examples was the CTO that became my manager, that even though that he didn't have the experience to really help me on the sales side, the way that he managed me and the confidence that he gave to me, right? So even in the periods that I was like, wow, like there's a lot going on, like you got this, just really, really a supportive manager. And that made a huge change in the early days of my career. So that was kind of really what I immediately picked up from okay, if you can get that impact on your team, they will go on and beyond for you. Similar as at that point, like I had absolutely no problem with making extra hours and really going crazy because I believed in what I was doing. And I also very much believed in the person that I was working with. And I've seen that throughout my whole career. Like if you show to the people that you are truly there for them, and I'm jumping on the calls late night when you need me, and I'm taking the time to teach you how to get better and to focus on your professional development and to ask you, what are your goals beyond this sales position? Where do you want to be in the next 5 years? And even more, if you now actually start connecting that information that they gave to you to giving them extra responsibilities that give them more experience in the direction that they want to go, right? So I made that a habit from very early on with my team, immediately kind of understanding what makes you tick, what are your goals? And if it was a goal for somebody that wanted to go in enablement, right? Great. So it's somebody that I'm going to focus more on to train other people. If it's somebody that wants to go into leadership, okay, great. Maybe join part of the interview process. If it's somebody that really likes design, okay, great. Maybe there's an area in sales enablement that can work. Now, of course, they first need to prove themselves in the role that they are, and they need to excel at it, right? And you need to, like, when you come into a company, you're hired for a specific role. So that's where it starts. But if you've been in that role for 2 years now, you did a great part. Everybody in the company recognizes that you're a great employee and you have really a good experience to now move to another area within the company. People won't stop that. And I think that's where a lot of the people that I work with, that they saw that I truly cared, that I was willing to take those extra hours to sit with them, that I was willing to do everything on my side to get them to success. And I think that just really pays off. And I still see that today. From the moment that I joined the new job now at Rep.ai, I had lots of people from the early days that reach out to me and they're like, hey, I was following. I saw that you went over here. How is it going? Are you hiring? Right? Things like that. So it goes a really long way. So for me, I always looked at it super simple. As a salesperson, the customer, right? The client is my customer. As a manager, my team is my customer. As a director, the managers are my customer. As a VP, the directors are my customer, right? Whoever is my team, and actually also everything that goes down the moment that you go up, because also the moment that you're a VP, the director is your customer, but also the manager is your customer, but also the people within the team, because in the end, their goals are your goals, right? You might not have you have a target on your head, of course, and the target is across the organization, and that target is then split over the team. So in the end, it's really simple. If they are successful, you are successful. If they're not successful, you're not successful. So if you're smart, you're doing everything in your power to make those people successful. And if you help people to be successful, they will appreciate it for the rest of your life. Because in the end, sales is a really, really good skill to have. It's not only in the company, everything in life is sales. You sell yourself when you go somewhere, you sell yourself in interviews, when you want to open something, when you want to start something, like it in the end all goes back to really help if you have good sales skills. So I think if you help somebody to get those skills that really help them to further develop in their career, and get to the next level, they will appreciate that a lot and they will remember that. And that also goes back to if you hire people with potential, that goes even a longer way because you gave them that chance in. And as we all know, it's not that easy to get a chance to work in a tech company without experience. But everybody needs that first chance to get the experience, to have experience. So usually people that are trying to make that switch and get that opportunity and then also get trained well will really, really appreciate that. And for me, that's always the way that I worked. If my team shows me that they're willing to work hard and that they're willing to work with me, I will do everything for them as well.
That's amazing. And reminds me of at Bets, we have a lot of people who now come back to us at CROs and they say, Carolyn Betts, our founder, gave me my first opportunity as an SDR 14 years ago. And now I'm a CRO and I'm hiring a full team and I'm going to do it through Bets because Carolyn is the one who saw potential in me and gave me my first opportunity. So that kind of gives me goosebumps, right? It's all about that potential.
I did the same thing.
Yeah, literally. It's like, when you know someone believed in you, you wanna kind of repay them for that.
Yeah, and even in this specific case, right, the person that introduced me for the position, I don't know if I can really say that she really believed in me and knew me because we weren't that close. But nevertheless, she gave me that opportunity, right? So still, that moment, the years later after that everything went, I did send her a message from, hey, you have no idea of how much you helped me, and I just wanted to say thank you. And it's not because we weren't the best friends. I met her I was doing a boot camp at the time, and I met her there, and then from there on she started giving the recommendations. But still, it changed my life. So those things people remember, and that's even when you don't have that strong relationship. So now imagine that it's a combination of that and you have a very strong relationship. Yeah. I can say all my first hires, both here and in New York, are still close friends of mine. The majority I'm still speaking on the regular. A lot of them are now working as directors and VPs in different companies. So it's also immediately an awesome network of people to work with in a similar industry. It goes such a long way. So I will say, really think about when you're starting into a company, it's not just your colleagues. These can be relationships and friends and connections for the rest of your life. And especially in client-facing roles and roles like sales, that really means a lot because your network is a huge thing, whether we talk about hiring, which I think is super appropriate here. Obviously, the bigger your network, the easier it is to hire good people.
Honestly, I think we should end it on your network is your net worth. I think is such a powerful statement. So with that, we're out of time, but thank you so much, Alan. This was absolutely amazing. I learned so much. Every time we chat, I learn a lot. Thank you for joining us. I really, really appreciate it. And obviously, we'll all keep an eye on you as you start your career at Rep.ai. Do you want to give us a little pitch on that company before we say goodbye?
Absolutely. So we help Shopify brands significantly optimize both their conversion rates, so the revenue, and we also significantly reduce the tickets. We do that through behavioral AI. So it's a very smart AI that allows to automatically respond to any questions that customers have, upsell them on conversion rates and upsells and adding all of the information to the cart. And on top of that, we uplift all of the data. So we give a huge amount of data, which is actually very relevant, for example, for marketing leaders, that they see exactly where do people drop off, what works well, what's the best performing pages, what are our best selling products, what are products that people are buying at the same time together. So it's really a combination of sales, customer success, lots of data points, and both ChatGPT and a behavioral AI. The last thing that I'll quickly say about it is the very cool thing about our product is if you're looking at most products, it's, for example, chat that immediately pops up whether you need it or not. And a really big differentiation that we have is our behavioral AI is focused on when somebody is disengaging. So we are only interacting when somebody is disengaging and about to leave the website. And that's something that our customers very much appreciate. So if you're interested, reach out to me, look at Rep.ai. The website is hellorep.ai, and I'm more than happy to speak. So for any Shopify merchants, you know where to find me.
That's amazing. And we'll link his LinkedIn because, like we said, his name is really difficult to spell and to pronounce. But thank you, Aron Vuijsje. That is how you pronounce it. So much. And thank you, everyone, for listening. We really appreciate it. This was Beyond the Hire.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.